Good morning, TTRA. My name is David Reichbach. I'm the Senior Director of Analytics and Data Security for Destination Analysts. That was an amazing lightning round of airline information, and I cannot wait for this next session that we are very honored to sponsor. He is absolutely right, and everything he said about demand increasing in terms of traveler demand for the airline industry, it will only continue to grow, as we're seeing in our sentiment tracker. As many of you in the industry know, we do the State of the American Traveler study. Every month we collect over 4,000 American leisure traveler data points, and it's the longest running tracking survey of American leisure traveler motivation, sentiment, and behavior. In our most recent wave, as of last month, we actually tested traveler sentiment on American leisure traveler perceptions of the airline industry because, as everyone knows from the news, all of the craziness that happened over the holidays with Southwest and many others. I can name names because I'm not with United. But over 70, it was almost 3/4 of American travelers said that they were aware of the issues. Only about 6% actually were personally impacted by travel delays, but 1 in 5, 20% of all American travelers said that because of those issues, they're now rethinking or maybe less likely to travel in the next 6 months. So these impacts, even if it's not directly impacting the majority of travelers, impact a significant amount of American traveler sentiment, and something we should all be aware of. So please, everyone, give your attention to this amazing panel, and I look forward to more information. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Like a bad penny, I'm back again. So I promised to speak a little slower this time. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be reading, so I will speak much slower. I'm really excited about doing this panel today. We've got a great group up here of industry experts that I think you're going to enjoy hearing from, and a very diverse group as well. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the consumer trends that we see out there in terms of from the data aspect as well as the practical side of this. What do we do with that data, and how should we as an industry be starting to think a little bit differently about our travelers and those that we're trying to attract to our locations. Our panel is mainly made up of folks that either directly or indirectly use data, travel data, both for the short and long-term planning, whether it's a DMO, an airline, or an airport. We're going to be talking about some of those trends the panel's seeing today, and both now, and we're going to talk about some of the longer-term implications as well. We'll save some time at the end for some questions, Q&A from all of you as well, and I've seen from this group so far, you ain't shy. So please, ask questions when we get to that point, and I encourage them on your part. So I'm going to real quickly just briefly introduce my esteemed panel up here. First, I'd like to introduce my neighbor, Jeff Pelletier. Jeff, you heard from yesterday, he sponsored the breakfast in the morning and spoke to us. But Jeff's managing director with Airline Data Incorporated. He's been with them since 2015 and currently is responsible for their overall development, delivery, operation, execution of airline data as an organization, including their suite of aviation data solutions. Jeff has more than 25 years of aviation, data management, and business intelligence experience. He works daily with airports, airlines, other travel-related clients to keep them and help them understand and navigate the aviation industry through data analytics, while all the time applying and communicating his very true in-depth knowledge of how the industry operates and performs. He's one of the few true data experts and subject matter experts in the industry regarding the intricacies in the processing and adjusting of the U.S. Department of Transportation's airline demand and revenue data, O&D T100 and Form 41, whatever the hell that is. Ask him. He holds a Bachelor of Business Economics, and unlike me, he was an honors, with a minor in international finance from the Brock University in St. Catharines, Ontario. He's originally from Toronto, as he mentioned yesterday. He's married and has lived in the Dallas area for more than 20 years. With that, please welcome Jeff to the stage. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome. Next is Jodie Brinkerhoff. Jodie's Vice President of Innovation at the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. She leads the innovation team's efforts to investigate, ideate, incubate, and implement, talk Talk about alliteration there. New products and solutions for the airports. Her team works across the enterprise, partnering with core businesses and business units, bringing emerging technologies, as well as other enablers to solve problems, both now and today and into the future. She's also responsible for the development of innovation, skill building, and culture initiatives for employees at the airport. She's passionate about understanding new trends and emerging technologies, inspiring transformational corporate culture, and building what's right for the customer. She's also a founding advisory board member of the leadership organization Women Leading Travel and Hospitality, a member of the Women's Enterprise or Empowerment Initiative within the WTTC, the World Travel and Tourism Council. She also is a member of several industry boards. She holds a BA in Communications from Loyola University in Maryland and a BA in Marketing and E-commerce from the University of San Francisco. So please welcome Jodie to the stage. And last but not least, Dan Swain. He's a strategic account executive for ARC, which is the Airline Reporting Corporation. He started his airline career with stints at US Airways and Austrian Airways, but he fully embraced his inner data geek in his role at ARC over the last 15 years. He works with ARC's emerging markets, which can be anything from DMOs, airport authorities, to travel tech companies, ground transportation, hoteliers, finance, and he tries to demystify airline ticketing data for the masses. It's quite a mouthful. Dan works out of Washington. He's always dreaming of his next trip, and he loves to travel. So please welcome Dan to the stage. Well, thank you. It's really quite a panel. I've been very impressed, and we've had some really wonderful discussions as we've been talking about today's session. So now that you've heard from each one of them, I'm going to ask each one to just briefly talk a little bit about what their organizations do and how they can impact all of you here in the room. So I'll start with Jeff.
First off, Dan, thank you for acknowledging your inner data geekness, because I never want to do it publicly, but I'm glad to do it now. So
Be proud. Be proud.
So thanks, Steve. Appreciate the introduction. As Steve mentioned, I'm Jeff Pelch, Airline Data Inc. Airline Data Inc., many people don't know, is actually entering their 35th year of operation. So we are one of the oldest and longest running aviation data systems and companies in the country, and we're proud to be fully American owned and operated in Dallas the entire time, which is so one of the few components people don't know about. But myself and my team, Richard Olmos is here. We are engaged daily in the aviation industry, and we take aviation as a passion. We look forward to working with any of our clients, and that is our entire goal, is focusing on whether it's you want to know about airfares or schedules, or we can get into the intricacies of aviation data, but that's really what we live and breathe every day. So I welcome the questions, and I'm looking forward to chatting with Dan and with Jodie about what we can try to impart upon you about what we think is going to happen in the industry in the coming future.
Thank you, Jeff. Jodie.
Good morning, everyone. Jodie Brinkerhoff. Thank you for the introduction, for having me. I work at this little place just north of here. It's a big airplane ranch up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. You might have heard of it. We are the second busiest airport, the most destinations, and it's really a pleasure to work in a place that's a smart city unto itself. With the complexity of any large city, my team actually works to solve problems across the airport with the express goal of de-risking the future. So a lot of the things, Steve, that you talked about that are on the horizon are where my team lives, in gray area and complete uncertainty. But our job is to sort of unpack that and de-risk the future for the airport.
Thank you. Dan.
Hi, everybody. Dan Swain. I'm with ARC, also known as ARC, or the Airlines Reporting Corporation. We go by lots of names. ARC, if you're not familiar with us, we're an institution in the airline industry, but always kind of in the background. At our core, we are the clearinghouse for airline tickets that are sold by travel agencies in the U.S., and that can be anybody from your mom and pop, travel on Main Street in your hometown, up to corporate travel agencies like American Express, and OTAs like Expedia and Priceline. So we manage that system for our airline owners. That's one of the things that really sets my organization apart from some of the other data companies out there, is that ARC is owned by the airline industry. We've got 8 North American airlines and 2 European airlines who sit on our board, and they direct all of our activities. So first and foremost, we do things on behalf of our airline owners to make distribution of their product easier, simpler, more efficient, and more profitable. By doing that, we get access to all this great data and have all this insight about what's going on in the traveling public. And my job is to take that and find ways to make it available to other great places, great audiences like DMOs, airports. I work with Wall Street. All kinds of, anybody who's interested in air travel can come to us in that regard. So you mentioned in my profile, it's a lot about demystifying airline data because, let's be honest, it needs some demystifying. It's complicated, it's confusing. So I spend a lot of time just kind of discussing what you're actually looking at and all the caveats that go along with it to make it a little more sensical. So.
Thank you, Dan. Well, speaking of data, we're going to take a look at what's going on now, what we're seeing in the data today, and maybe for what we see going forward for about the next 12 months and into next year. So I'm going to start with Jeff. I mean, you work with data every day, and DMOs and airport authorities, et cetera, across the country. How can, number one, what are you seeing in the data? And how can the DMOs that are out here and the different organizations leverage that data in conversations with the airport authorities?
Talk about a loaded question. You think I'd already have a prepared answer, and I keep thinking about this all the time, as we even talked about this yesterday morning. The data is, you're right, it's changing so much, and there's a lot of mystery to it, only because since COVID has come to play, and now that we've moved past it, the industry has changed. The fundamentals of how an airline planner plans those aircraft has fundamentally changed. How the airport operates, it's all fundamentally changed. And that's been the challenge, and that's what we've been working with on a day-to-day basis, is how do we re-educate all of ourselves? And it's coming down to more real-time decisions. Gone are the days of knowing what's going to happen with confidence for the next 3 to 6 months. That is gone. We barely know what's going to happen now in April. I think, as you saw the other day, there are still fundamental changes happening for April. That's only 5 weeks away, and yet we're still finding adjustments to schedules, adjustments to capacity, adjustments to timing. That's still happening. So it comes down to the DMOs, the airlines, the airports. They need to get closer to a more real-time reaction to how the community is going to be served. And I think that's the big thing, is getting into more real-time opportunities and real-time reviews of that information.
And how do DMOs prepare for that? You know? Is there a simple answer?
Unfortunately, there's no simple answer. I think what it comes down to is learning how to trend your data, but also learning how to understand that the trends are great, but there's always going to be last-minute adjustments to those trends. A lot of folks are doing trends on 2017, 2018, 2019. A lot of the trends prior to 2019 are now basically, I hate to say it, being thrown away. The trends prior to 2019 don't really apply anymore. You can look at 19, you can ignore 20, and honestly, a lot of people literally cut 20 out of their slide decks and out of their analysis because it's just garbage. I hate to say it, but it's garbage because you basically, you're just going to take a dip. You can take a look at those trends, you can look at those trends, and you can try to understand what's going on, but just always know that when it comes to 2022 and into 2023, it's those end numbers, they're going to change. They're going to change.
Thanks, Jeff. Dan, I know you work with a different set of data. What are you seeing in the data today?
Well, to piggyback on what Jeff said, I mean, yes, the airlines are changing the way they operate, but so are our passengers, right? So the traveling public is not buying tickets, making their plans the way that they did pre-pandemic. We've seen this throughout the last couple of years, ever waiting to see if we go back to what is normal. And there is no normal anymore, to kind of piggyback on also what Adam mentioned yesterday. We always think that we're getting to a point, and it doesn't really shake out. So what is the new normal? Just in terms of behavior, we see there's been a dramatic shift in terms of the channel of sale that people buy their tickets on. Before the pandemic, we were about 50% of passengers would buy their tickets directly from the airline through the airline's websites, right? The other half was through agencies and managed travel. With the pandemic, that spiked up to more like 65% of people going direct and ignoring the travel agency. And that's come back down a little bit, but we're still at least 60%, 60-40 mix now. So the agency channel has gotten a lot weaker. A lot of that is, we think, because of still a depressed corporate demand. Business travel has not come back. We're about 75% of what it was before the pandemic. And it's not really changing all that much in the last few months. We're kind of steady there. Will it come back this year, or is it next? We don't know. And then other strange behaviors like the amount of one-way tickets that we see has doubled in the last 2 years. People have stopped buying round-trip tickets as frequently. They buy one way on one airline, one way on another airline. And why does that matter? It makes it impossible to figure out what your duration of stay is, because I can't link that passenger if it's on 2 different itineraries, 2 different airlines. We don't know what their full itinerary looks like along the way. All kinds of weird things like that. The distribution, even on the corporate side, is changing, where airlines are encouraging direct connect relationships with the corporations and bypassing the GDS completely. How many people are aware of what a GDS is? It's the booking system, right, that travel agencies use. Well, they're bypassing that and having the data go directly to the airline, which again affects the data that you all are using and how much of that is missing compared to what it was a couple years ago. All that stuff is changing, and we're still trying to get an idea of what this is all going to shake out to be.
And one thing, Dan, maybe remember that, I can't believe I forgot, from a DMO perspective, the elimination and the non-return of change fees has fundamentally changed the view of the traveling public. Because gone are the days of knowing that if I buy that $400 ticket, that $200 change fee, if I change my mind, used to suck up half of that and it would be worthless. The fact that those are gone and hopefully not coming back. I love the fact there's no change fee. I changed my ticket to come down here 6 times. But that is changing the fundamental view of your destination passenger. Like, you know what? I can book closer in, or I can book far out, and I can change it as many times as I want now to fit my needs. And that, I think, is going to also mess with Dan's data, because it's going to change. The ticket's being reissued so many times, but it's allowing the public to just decide what they want to do with fewer handcuffs to that purchase.
Can I just offer a comment also as I listen to both of you and think about the customer? I mean, as much as I'd like to wipe the pandemic out of my brain, the reality is the upside was a real move and shift towards digital transformation. So even my 74, 75-year-old dad is booking things online now where he might have otherwise gone to a travel agent.
Right.
And his confidence in his own ability to navigate the various channels has grown because they sat at home for a year with nothing other than the internet to access. So if we think about the customer and sort of their abilities in today's day and age, the patterns of what they're doing, I think, is evidence of what we're seeing today.
Yeah, there's so much more flexibility
Yep.
than 2 years ago.
So how do you, Jodie, I'm curious, how do you deal with that from the airport perspective?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of ways that we deal with that, but I mean, as an innovator, we're always talking about human-centered design, right? And so you have to look at who your customer is, what their persona is, what their likes, their needs, how they think, how they feel. And it's changed dramatically in terms of what we can expect from the passenger. So, you know, 3 years ago when we might have been doing research, we might have said, well, our senior travelers are going to do it this way. But now, that's sort of a moot point. You know, now we can expect that digital tools are accessible by a much broader audience. And when you factor that in with the penetration of smartphones and things like Siri to help people around, or OK Google, or whatever it is, you know, you can try different things and experiment in a way that you might have been limited before, just based on abilities that were associated with different customer groups.
Well, given the strong demand that's out there, you know, how's the airport dealing with changes in demand patterns, the need to staff differently at the TSA, customs, gate agents, et cetera? What's happening there?
It's hard. It's something that we talk about, and we heard a lot about staffing and things like that yesterday. Not long ago, I asked our COO, I said, you know, if you had a magic wand and could see into the future, what would you be looking for? And he said, you know, I'd really love to understand what the staffing environment's going to be over the next 12 months. Now, I hear that as someone who's tasked with de-risking the future, and I think about, well, you can't wait necessarily and feel that out, other than looking at some of the economic trends we looked at yesterday. My job is to think about how can we build more resiliency into our business so that when there are peaks and valleys, we can switch on and off to automated tools and things like that. So, you know, while it's very early, we're testing sort of, you know, digital solutions using things like IBM Watson and, you know, lifelike avatars and things like that you may not need them on any given day, but when there's an IROP or a disruption, you may be able to turn those things on to give you additional bandwidth. in your customer satisfaction group, et cetera.
Thank you. It's a question for, I'll just throw it out to the group. Given what you all are seeing in the data, how should DMOs, hoteliers, airlines, et cetera, be thinking differently about changing either their product and service offerings today or for the long term? We see that there's this involvement of the hybrid worker, the leisure traveler, et cetera. But what are you seeing in the data? How do we adjust for that? Or how should people in the audience be thinking about that?
I mentioned this yesterday, and I continue to go down this road. It is so important now for DMOs to be much more closely intertwined with their airport partners and their local business community. I hate to speak for United, but I'm going to speak for some other airlines I've talked to. They are adamant that success in a market now comes from everybody, not just someone like Jodie at an airport bringing money to the table. It is so important now that they see that cohesive communication saying we are committed to service because, as you mentioned, there's hundreds and hundreds of aircraft still. We don't have enough pilots. They're going to be very, very picky. And that's what I hear consistently is they've got to be very picky. They've got to go where there's going to be long-term success. And the short-term success is no longer on their short-term radar. And that's the biggest thing, if I was to impart upon anybody in this room, is that long-term success comes from that long-term partnership.
So a lot of that really comes down to the quality of the business plan that you're presenting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can look at load factors and schedules and all that all day long, but it's the business plan to communicate to the airline how committed your community is to that service because there are tons of opportunities to go to other airports and other destinations. You need to be front of mind to be able to get that very infrequent 75-seater or maybe that new Air A220 or A319. You've got to be ultra aggressive at communicating to the airline. You're going to make your market win.
Great. That's great advice. Thanks, Jeff. Jodie, please.
We did a survey recently, and I think there was actually a Forbes or Fortune article that talked about 82% of businesses thought that their employees were really interested in leisure travel, which extends the stay, brings additional family members, et cetera. And some recent intercepts that we did with customers suggested that about 1/3 of the passengers we talked to were on some sort of a leisure trip. That was at DFW, our own research. And so when you think about that, and actually I think there was an indicator that suggested most of the leisure travelers were higher level executives, probably have the financial wherewithal to bring members of their family, their spouse, their children. And so my thinking is, okay, what new products and services can we offer in collaboration with businesses and such to say, hey, let's not make this hard on your person. Let's create opportunities for them to bring, and a value proposition that attracts them to bring their spouse or their children. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity for all of us, the way we think and prepare for some of these package programs and things like that.
Yeah, and I think you just have to build in a sense of nimbleness into your plans and be ready and excited at the opportunity to change midway through it. As you mentioned earlier on, Steve, the China market is not coming back. Well, if you're a DMO that was thinking, I'd love to get more China business this year, well, we need to change plans and look at different opportunities. And I always go back to the answer is in the data. There is data available out there to kind of give you this forward-looking view of what is happening, or what is coming down your pipeline. People can buy an airline ticket up to 330 days in advance. Not many people do go that far, but we see in advance what their booking behavior is going to be, what they've already purchased for your upcoming shoulder season or peak season. And you can see, are you on pace for what you would have been doing the year before? And are there markets that are soft? If there are, be ready and nimble enough to have a plan, send it to your marketing team and try something different, experiment, and see if you can fill the gap when you see that softness coming towards you.
I think it's interesting as I hear that and I think about myself as an avid traveler, and the booking times are shorter and shorter, and I'm thinking about where do I find information? If I'm making this Uberization of the people and their behaviors, things are really, really fast. And where are people going on a day-to-day basis? They're going to social media channels. I find out all of event stuff that I'm interested in, like Facebook, and I bookmark it, and it reminds me. And so it's a different way to think when you're dealing with the the patterns that we're actually seeing.
The patterns have actually changed a lot too. I don't know, I mean, I mentioned that people in the past used to book much further out in the future than they do now, especially for international trips. That shrunk dramatically during the pandemic, and it's slowly returning back to where it was before. But you know, you can't look at like 6-month horizons and be locked in and not be ready to adjust along the way, because that's just not the way that our passengers are behaving right now.
And while a lot of our focus that we've been talking about so far has been very short term in terms of the near term, there are a lot of implications about what travel is going to look like going forward in the future. And I know you, Jodie, in particular, are very involved in trying to figure out future trends. What are you going to see at an airport? What about these eVTOLs that I talked about? Other types of technology that are coming. How do you work with your team to get in front of that?
Yeah. First of all, it's not something you can do on your own, right? You look into this very uncertain future with a product that didn't exist before, and you have to bring your partners together. So whether it be the cities, the FAA, TSA plays a role in that. It's a very complex ecosystem. And then the other thing is going back to the passenger. What's going to be their adoption curve? You know, we talked a lot about ChatGPT yesterday, and the adoption curve from that, went straight up. I think it was 5 days to hit 1 million subscribers. And so, those patterns of adoption are changing certainly, but there is a lot to work out when you start to talk about, unmanned helicopters in the air driving passengers around. But I mean, that's a great opportunity because, as you mentioned in your talk, Steve, you can change the way that people gain access to certain places. And as DMOs and as airports and as cities, we have to think about those things, both from what does that cannibalize in terms of my existing business because it opens up new opportunities elsewhere. But if I am one of those places it's sort of hard to get to, how do I create the dynamic that will attract people when these new technologies start to open up and make it more viable?
Jeff, you're working with DMOs all the time and destinations, and how would you advise them to think about the future and incorporating that into the longer-term planning?
I am obviously nowhere near an eVTOL expert or what have you. Jodie's far more versed in that than I am. I think from a DMO perspective, looking to the future, I have to look at what we have right now and what we are going to be able to do. And it comes down to understanding how your markets are going to continue to function. eVTOLs are going to be great. And if we can get the Uber of the sky going, that's only going to augment a destination's opportunity to get additional seats and visitors into their city. I think for now, the focus needs to be on your market and your surrounding markets and how do you bring those visitors to your market based on what we have today. And a lot of that comes down to car rental fleets having sufficient cars in order to allow folks to fly into neighboring cities in order to get to your destination. It comes down to more efficient shuttle services from maybe airports that are a little farther away than what you would like because you can't attract the close-in service. So there's shuttle services, there's rental car fleets, there's other ways to get passengers to the destination, and it's focusing on that movement that's maybe not on the airport, but tangential to the airport, and that will allow you to continue to bring visitors into your market. And that's really, I think, where a lot of folks maybe sometimes take their eye off the ball. And as they see rental car fleets start to deteriorate, hours of operation start to shut down, Ubers start to be a little less ease of access to the airport, it's things like that that make it a little harder for the traveling public to get to where they want to be.
Thank you. I don't know, I'm always fascinated when we've had our discussions about things going forward. But I want to stop here for a second, and I'm going to open up the floor to all of you to see if you have any questions of all of us. I've got more questions for the group, but I'd rather have you ask some questions of us. So if there's anybody out there, I know there's mics in the back.
I'm ready to run wherever you need me to go. Close.
I just didn't want you to run too far. Lori from Daytona Beach. So what's an example of one of those community programs where it's more than just the airport, it's more than just the DMO, it's the entire community. Like, what does that actually look like? Because I think we're all on the DMO space probably looking at how do we use that prototype to attract more service. Jeff.
Thank you, Lori. How did I know that question was coming? Without spending 30 minutes talking about the intricacies of that, it really comes down to finding your airport partner, i.e. your local Daytona Beach air service development person, but it's beyond that. It's actually getting into the community and understanding who are your biggest corporate buyers, much like Dan was alluding to when it comes to corporate travel. It's the corporate buyers, it's the large entertainment facilities, it's the large hotels, it's anything that would bring medium to large volumes of passengers to the city, and together putting together the business plan that shows the airline that there's a commitment to the service. It's showing that we have a 500-room hotel that's going to be opening next month. We've got a master's level golf course. It's enough to show the airline that there's reason to service the market beyond just an airport with 15 gates. But it's finding all those partners, and it's picking someone to actually corral all those people. It's like corralling cats. So whether it's you or whether it's your airport, it's one or the other, but it's usually the airport that has to drive that relationship, but it's getting yourself into that relationship to show the airline that there's commitment at all levels.
Yeah.
That's really key.
And I would add to that, I mean, from the airline side, even though I'm not really involved in this, I am on the sales side. And we go through this with a lot of the local DMOs, helping to try and work with them to get additional service into cities or community leaders. And if you can get the buy-in of, if you do have a corporate base, even if it's not large corporations, even medium, small-sized corporations, if you can get the buy-in, the actual written buy-in from several CEOs of local businesses that they will support this air service, that goes a long way from our perspective, because we're looking for average volumes on a daily basis to be able to support a daily operation. And a lot of it is that business, ideally the business travel helps augment the leisure travel enough such that if you get that business buy-in, we take that very seriously, that we see the commitment on their end.
And I think a lot of times the airline planners don't know your community.
Right.
Somebody at headquarters in Chicago or Atlanta or Dallas, they don't, no offense, they don't know Daytona Beach. They may know the airport, but they don't know what's around it. You need to educate those planners so they know what you've got to offer beyond just the airport. That's the biggest thing, is that education and utilizing the 15 or 20 minutes you can get of their time to help them understand what your market has to offer.
Great. Other questions?
Back in the left here. Back left.
Marie Hansen, Visit Orlando. Right here.
Right on the light.
We use seat capacity data on a weekly basis, probably a little too much, but it's one of the indicators for us of understanding the health of the destinations in terms of return of that airline service to the destination. And you just mentioned that looking beyond April at this point is a little tricky. We know that booking windows, even for airline tickets, are really short. So 2 questions here. One is, what would be your best practice in how far out we should be looking at with some sort of reliability? And 2, how do we talk people off the ledge when they see a drop-off on seats compared to the, let's say, prior period that we have a comparison to?
I guess that's me again. In my opinion, I think 4 to a max of 6 months is your window right now. And anything beyond 6 months, so if we're in the middle of February now, I think anything beyond midsummer is still highly subjective to the airline, and I think Steve would agree that the planners are only looking at the next 4 to 6 months to figure out where is the demand, because like Dan mentioned, travelers are pulling their bookings in. They're using demand-based algorithms and the current revenue structures that are coming in over the next 3 to 6 weeks to help allocate those aircraft. And if there's high demand, the aircraft is going to be moved. If there's short demand, it's going to be moved somewhere else. So I wouldn't go much more than 6 months out. And now to talk people off the ledge when it comes to a drop in capacity, I think it's just educating them, let them know that gone are the days of the 6 to 12 month scheduled planning. The airlines are only focusing on the next 6 months, and to not worry about it. And I know it just sounds like words, but all they are placeholders. It's enough for the booking to occur, but that's about it. They're going to change it. So it's a simplistic, trust me. It's a,
Yeah.
a trust you as the airport to say you're working with the airline partners, you understand the new dynamics of the new world, and that's where we are right now.
Yeah, the capacity information is only meaningful in context with the demand, right? If you've got a lot of demand, the airlines will probably find ways to put capacity in the market,
Yep.
right? If you've got a lot of capacity and there's not demand, then you're going to lose that capacity. And so you've got to look at both and see, are they aligned? Is it mismatched? If you have a new flight started, we can look in advance and see how your future bookings doing. Are they performing the way you anticipated them to, or you hoped for them to? And if not, what can you do about it to make sure that flight is successful so that the airline keeps it there? Because if that flight is flying at, honestly these days 70%, 80%, that's not enough anymore.
No, you need to
Most
hit
of our
90s or
you got to be in the 90s to keep that aircraft when there's so much demand elsewhere that it could be shifted to.
Yeah, make sure too we know about convention business, those types of things. We work with a lot of those big CVBs or convention centers, but we may not know in a lot of your communities from our perspective, what do you have on the books? So make sure that's information I'm sure that Jeff is chasing, but make sure we on the airline side know about that as well. There was a question that came in via the chat that was directed to me, so I'll try and answer this real briefly. So the question is, other than supply and demand, what are some of the factors that determine airfare cost? It's a good question. At the end of the day, market demand is really going to rule where we set price based on things. However, the two biggest cost factors for the airline industry are fuel. It's about 30% of our costs, and followed shortly, not too far below that, is labor costs. Labor costs tend to get passed on, and it's smoothed out because the whole industry's kind of at the same labor wages. It's really fuel that dictates in many cases what happens. We're very susceptible, it used to be like for United, a penny increase in the cost of a barrel of oil was a $100 million swing for United. We consume 1% of the world's oil every day. And again, a penny difference makes a huge difference. So it's primarily oil. And when you see oil prices spike, prices tend to follow that. And sometimes they're hidden costs. You'll see them in, there may be hidden costs in terms of fuel surcharges and things like that we use to recoup, especially internationally. But domestically, I would say we're probably a little less volatile fuel. It's international in particular. The other thing that we do factor into cost are it could be distribution costs, other types of things. Are we distributing through an agency? Are we distributing through one of the online booking tools? There's some hidden costs and things like that are maybe passed along, may not be passed along in terms of distribution channel. So I'm happy to answer more detail. Whoever sent this in, hit me up afterwards and we can chat a little bit more in detail. Are there another question over here? We still have about a minute, a little over a minute. Please.
Hi, over here. I just curious, understanding the passenger's demand versus a visitor demand. How are the airports and the airlines looking at what visitors are seeking? We've all seen VFR explode during COVID, and the airlines recognizing that, which I don't know if they ever knew what VFR ever meant before that. So how are you integrating more and more of the traveler's perspective of where they want to go, how they're going, planning what they're doing from the visitor point of view versus the passenger data side?
That sounds like a Jodie question to me.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's an interesting dynamic, right? Because it's not like I have passenger data. And this gets into our conversation where we started, which was the importance of looking at what the passenger needs are. If I could convey to everybody, especially at the airlines, that sharing customer data would be beneficial to delivering a seamless, frictionless passenger journey, we would all be sort of delivering that personalization to you, the passenger. And when you arrive at the airport, first of all, we would know you're on your way. Then we would be able to sort of pass you through security, offer you a coupon at your favorite, concessionaire as you arrive. That's sort of the nirvana of a fully connected, personalized, seamless experience. But that takes a lot of parties who in today's end-to-end environment all claim ownership of the passenger at a certain point. So we spend a lot of time looking at that, and some of the enabling technologies that perhaps get us there are digital identities, biometrics, and all sorts of other data-driven, making data-driven decisions that are enabled by things like sensors throughout the airport, and data analytics on your cameras and all of that. So, a long way to go in that regard. But again, I'm a firm believer that if you stay centered on the passenger, the customer needs, we'll get there.
Unfortunately, we're out of time here. I would just add to that real quickly is I know we have this dichotomy of wanting to share a lot of that passenger information, yet the passenger in many cases says data privacy. I don't want that information being passed on. So it's this yin and yang of right now of trying to do the right thing for the customer the way they want it to happen. With that, go ahead, I'll let you.
Really quickly.
Yeah, real quick.
But the thing for us is to figure out what can I deliver in exchange for that personalized data. And that value proposition to get me smoothly to where I want to go is, again, the challenge for all of us.
Good. Well, thank you. Number one, how about a big round of applause for our panel here?